pandémie. Pandémie.
Pandémie.
Pandémie.
Pandémie.
Pandémie. Okay. I think I got it. Well, hello, and thanks for tuning back in. Today I am going to make a pandémie, or a Pullman loaf, depending on what century this is and what continent you're on. Why am I making this particular kind of bread? Well, it's the bread with which you make a Croque Monsieur, and the Croque Monsieur was requested specifically by my good buddies Sean and Amanda, who are currently buried under snowdrifts in the frozen wastelands of Iowa. I hope you guys are still alive out there. What is a pandémie or a Pullman loaf? It is a regular sort of white bread, but it's baked in a particular kind of loaf pan, which I'm showing you a picture of right now because I don't own one and I'm not going to. Since they're baked in the pan with the cover, they come out with sort of a little bit of a closer texture on the crumb, and then they're, obviously restricted by the pan, so they're kind of perfectly square. Like I said, I'm not going to buy one of those loaf pans because they cost at least 20 bucks. I live in a one-bedroom apartment and I don't have room or necessity for yet another loaf pan in my life. I do already own a loaf pan. I own one of these guys. This is a Corningware loaf pan. Figures a lot of you guys probably have something like this in your kitchen already. And I also have this little casserole, this Pyrex casserole dish. That fits on top of that rather handily. I feel like I might be able to jury rig something together. Let's see how this goes. So this is a pretty standard, how's my hair? I'm lazy, so I'm going to use my stand mixer. I'm using King Arthur Flour's recipe for a smaller pandémie. And they said to load everything into the mixer in this order. A cup of room temperature water. Honey. You could almost certainly use sugar if you wanted to. Couple tablespoons of softened butter, teaspoon and a half of salt. Into the bullshit. Got yeast. You know about yeast, right? Gives you infections and stuff. It's delicious in bread. We got powdered milk. It's not great for drinking, but it's great for baking. We need a dough hook because I'm lazy and I'm not mixing this shit by hand. My instincts say to start gradually adding flour until we come up with some kind of a dough. Ah, yeah. Making a mess. Don't worry. It's going to happen. You'll make a mess. That's baking. That's cooking. So I'm kneading this in the mixer until it makes a smooth dough. It says it's not going to be particularly soft, but it should be smooth and somewhat elastic. We look like we're getting close to it. Why don't we stop and take a look? I feel like that's probably what that's supposed to look like. So let's move on to the next step of the process, which is to, we need to let this rise. And so we need to have a place for it to rise, and since I'm lazy and don't like doing dishes, I'm going to let it rise in this bowl, but we need to turn it out so we can grease the bowl. I can't believe my camera didn't fall off the side of the stand mixer. Genuinely impressed by that Gorilla Pod. Not sponsored. Lightly greased to me means like cooking spray, so I'm going to... I don't have cooking spray, because like my wife's into some hippie shit sometimes. And so we have this thing that's constantly clogged up and never works quite right. So there we just had like an anemic sort of spray of cooking oil. I believe this is canola that's in there right now. I'll just kind of turn him in on himself a little bit and drop him in there. There we go. There's our ball of dough in a lightly greased bowl. We need to let it sit for an hour, hour and a half, until it's puffy but not necessarily doubled in size according to the recipe. So probably clockwise. Well, this here's been rising for about 90 minutes and it's not doubled in size, but it's definitely inflated in volume. It smells very deliciously bready. We need to get this turned out into our loaf pan, which we also need to lightly grease. There's our lightly greased pan. Here's our dough that's risen to a lovely degree. Oh my. And so what we need to do is we need to take this and form it sort of vaguely into a loaf shape, like ideally. And we'll sort of pinch it around at the bottom. This is, not necessarily the right way to do it, but it's a way to do it. And we should probably also have a close-up on this. We're gonna cover this with plastic again and let it rise for another 60 minutes or so, or until it's about within a half an inch of the top of the pan. See you after this clock wipe.
About 30 minutes into the rise, preheat your oven to 350.
We're ready to put this lovely loaf into the oven. As you can see, it has raised precipitously. It's time to prepare the lid, so we're going to prepare it the same way we did the loaf pan, which is, greasing it with some... Oh, see, look at that. That's ridiculous. That is not a nice, effective mist. I'm just going to go ahead and lid it up. All right, well, now we just need to put this thing in the oven and hope for the best.
Well, as you can see, I had to add a little bit more weight, hashtag Giles Corey, onto the loaf. The loaf was blowing up enough that it was blowing the smaller pan off of my loaf pan. So there we go. At this point, we're 20-25 minutes into the cooking process. You want to gently remove your lid so that you don't damage your top crust. You want to drop that guy right back into the oven. Well, not drop it, gently place it back into the oven until we get a finished crust, which is going to be about 5 more minutes. And here we are. We can see we have a lovely crispy golden brown crust.
I checked the temperature. It's between 195 and 200 degrees Fahrenheit, as is recommended by the recipe. We just need to get it out of the pan and onto a cooling rack. So, this is always the most harrowing part, is the unmolding of any baked good. Here we go. Oh, yeah. Oh, come on, you bastard. Oh, there it goes. Not too shabby. There's a little bit of stickage in the pan that's not ridiculous. Well, there we go. That's a pretty darn square loaf of bread. I'm pretty pleased with that. We're going to let this guy cool down, and if we're going to store it overnight, we're going to wrap it in plastic once it's completely cool. So you can see it's good bread. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's tasty. It's a little bit dense because it's, it was in a loaf pan that was too small for it, but I think I gotta go buy one of those fucking pans. Make sure to come back next week. Thanks for watching. It's still not your dinner time, though. It's still 30 minutes early, cat.